Hello everyone, welcome back on the AgriAdventures channel. This is Simone Berliat, and today we are here for another episode of the AgriAdventures garden tips. So a little change on our traditional format of 15 minutes interviews on AgriAdventures. Today we are live, by the way, and we'll have the opportunity to speak with somebody that we already had the chance to. And we will speak about interesting topics correlated with gardening. We are over here, South Australia. We are I'm nearby Adelaide, and depends using Zoom, we can move around a little bit, sometimes even interstate or internationally. And the topic for today will be how to feed your garden with your scraps, if you want to say. So we have with us today Malcolm Haines, and welcome, Malcolm. Welcome to the AgriAdventures platform.
Hello, Simone. Good day, everybody.
And so today the idea was to continue the topic that we started a couple of weeks ago. Again, here last time we've been speaking about pests and predators correlated with gardening. And today, the idea is to explain or help a little bit out people or to feed their own garden. So you're Malcolm, you're based at the Ligaya garden. That's over there that you have your mine experience. You said how many years you are doing the garden over there?
6 years now, Simone.
Oh, okay.
It's 96, yeah. People are surprised when they come here.
Lovely. So that's definitely a place that we should visit one day. So you come with this idea for today. So why did you think about speaking about feeding the garden and using what we have available at home?
Well, last week we were talking about pests and predators and why not to use poisons and how to identify things that could help you. So I figured we'd continue in the same theme and look at feeding your garden without artificial fertilizers.
Okay.
Without having to buy stuff. But there's a whole range of things you can make out of your own scraps and little bits and pieces that you can bring in. And I think you'll be quite surprised at what's available.
Wow. Yeah, I remember for my knowledge that I had a look sometimes at the history of gardening and how important was the change that happened when we introduced the chemical fertilizers. Yeah. Like before that time, people was going around and looking to harvesting bird poos from really unknown archipelagos because we were running out of easy to use fertilizing. So it's really interesting. We are trying to move back a little bit. And are there specific motives why we would be interested to use home-created fertilizer?
Well, A, it's really easy. B, we're throwing away a lot of the scraps. And on a third point, a lot of your fertilizers, as you say, were mined from archipelagos for superphosphate. And a lot of them are actually produced from fossil fuels, from crude oil. So by making our own fertilizers, we're reducing the amount of fossil fuel use.
Okay, that is definitely something really good. If we keep in consideration that we not just have to have it made using fossil fuels, but also we want to transport them. Yeah, and then we want to store them. And we want to do all this process that they obviously are increasing the carbon footprint. While if we speak about food that we have every day at home or close by, we already been doing that process. So it's a way to reuse something, which is definitely useful for obviously for us that we have our own garden and then we are not producing massively, but we want to look after what we have already.
Yeah. And these techniques will show you that they're ideal for the home garden, not for farms, not for big agriculture, just for home gardens and small families. And I think that's what we've really got to aim at for agriculture now, is get rid of all the huge stuff and make it small, local, tiny, slow, all of those words that are being used for different movements. And yeah, we can do a lot of it at home. And a lot of it's actually recycling stuff from your garden that you wouldn't normally use, which you throw away into your green bin, for example. And you can reuse it and you can make some ideal fertilizers out of it. And if you think along the lines of, my thinking is that a tree, for example, has to put a lot of energy and a lot of resources into making that fruit for it to reproduce, and we get the fruit and we benefit from it. Why put the waste from that into the bin and send them out? Feed it back to the same plant, feed it back to the plants that produced it, and that'll help to balance out their nutrients. And also, linking back, it'll help to balance out the pests and predators as well, linking back to the last episode. So there's all kinds of good reasons for doing it.
Absolutely.
And I think I've got a few here that'll surprise you too.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's something, the techniques you're going to explain to people that's following us? By the way, I would like to thank the North Brighton Community Garden that they've been supportive the last time we are sharing today. So if you are following us on their Facebook page,
everybody.
Hello everyone. And
that's
then
Alex Miller and Company, isn't it? Yeah, hi Alex.
Absolutely. Well, it's a small community, but really, really strong community in the area. And while the gardening community, or the community garden community over here, it's really interesting and really supportive. So I was wondering, for people that they are interested to this type of techniques, do they need to have any special ingredients? Like, for instance, you need to have a chicken if you want to have a chicken pool. Or what was it something that is required and what is not really important? Would you like to mention to us?
The two main ones that we'll look at here, and they're easily available from fodder stores or party supply places or wholesalers. You're looking at white vinegar or apple cider vinegar, depending on which one you prefer, and molasses. And as long as you've got your hands on those, you can make so many different kinds of fertilizer. And of course your scraps too. You've got to have scraps. And you'll probably find that by the time we finish with this, you'll be wanting to go to your neighbors and ask them for their scraps too.
Well, that is another good thing I can say. Like, if your neighbors, they don't have it, instead of having the truck coming to collect scraps every 2 weeks, and then you can simply organize with your friends in the area and say, okay, guys, you don't have the garden, I have a garden. You are not interested to spend your time to do that. I love to do it. You give me your scrap and I give you some products back.
Exactly. That's the way it works around here.
Lovely. Definitely. Really, really interesting. So would you like to tell us what are the bases of these fertilizers?
Let's start. Can I share the screen here for a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. One thing to think about is to use plants that you've already got. Plants already have the nutrients in them. I'm just trying to load up slowly. My screen's pretty slow today. Should be a picture coming up in a minute. And here's one that you'll see a lot of in ponds and gardens and everywhere around the place. You might recognize it as your general common pondweed, your azolla. Everybody that's got a pond or a lake near them or a creek has this weed floating around in it. Some people call it duckweed. But this one you can grow in buckets at home. You don't need to put a pond in or anything for it. Mm-hmm. And you can just throw this out on your garden. It's an amazing thing. Let me just swap back here. Where's my stop screen sharing? There we are. All right, now, sorry, I'm just getting used to this.
That's fine.
Now that plant has a lot of protein, a lot of nitrogen, and a whole bunch of minerals in it. So what we do here, we have it growing in tubs. We feed it to the chickens, but you don't have to have chickens. We just put it straight on the ground as mulch, or straight into, when I make up a new bed of soil or something, I mix a lot of that in there. It breaks down really, really quickly and gives your garden a huge boost. And all you need to grow it is a few centimeters of water. So then you've got a few other plants from your garden like that, like comfrey. A lot of us would know comfrey, rich in nitrogen, potassium, all kinds of good stuff. At the right time of year, nettles. Nettles is a great one as well. And there's several different ways to use these. You can put them straight onto the garden and they'll break down and the microbes will do all their work and break them down for you. Or you can do the traditional way, which is to ferment them. And any weed, you can do this with any weed. All you do is you put it in a bucket of water, keep it covered, make sure that the weeds are underneath the water so they don't actually break down. And then the anaerobic bacteria will break that down and suck all of the goodness out of them. This container here is Nettles. And Nettles is full of iron, full of potassium, calcium, all kinds of stuff. And at the right time of year, we're throwing it away. We're just dumping it.
Absolutely. Well, if I can say something about nettles.
Yeah.
In Italy, we use nettles for cooking.
Yep.
So we do nettle soup, and we can even do nettles gnocchi. But also, the nice thing is the nettles, they are really good for our health, for the circulatory system, so for blood system. And so I was surprised the first time I came over here and finding that nettles are considered weed over here. So, but anyway, it's good that we still have a good use for these plants, which are amazing for cuisine, but also are amazing for the garden.
Yeah, it took me a long time to learn how to love them because they were just, to me, they were just a pain. But then slowly, as I learned about the herbal side of it, they've got they're very nutritious, as you know, from what you used to eat. They also got an antihistamine in them. So you take nettles just before springtime comes and your hay fever won't be so bad. And way back in the old days, back in the 1700s, they were an aphrodisiac as well. So many, many uses, but mainly for the garden. We just make a tea out of them and the tea smells really bad. You can do the same with comfrey. And both teas smell really bad, so you only want to use it once when your neighbours are out, so nobody complains. And then spread that around the garden, and it just breaks down. The microbes do amazing things. Now I've got a system here for nettles, which is a pipe, a long pipe, and into that goes there's a bottle full of water on a string, and then that pipe goes to, oops, sorry, I'm going the wrong way here. No, where have I done it? Let me stop sharing and jump to the next one for a second.
That's okay.
I'll put them out of sequence. Oh, there we are. So these pipes, these are upside down because I just cleaned them. So if you imagine that, let's see if we can rotate this around. There you go. So imagine they're going this way and ignore the fact the plant's upside down. So you pack in the nettles, you pack in the comfrey or whatever weeds, your thistles work well. And then you put into here a bottle full of water on a string so you can get it back out. And then that will slowly press down, slowly compact the nettles and squeeze the juice out here where you get it from a bottle. And that's a very strong, very clean liquid. You don't need to strain it. And you can use it, dilute it like 10 to 1, 20 to 1. Put it straight on your plants. All the goodness of the nettles or the comfrey are in there and it doesn't smell.
Okay, that is really good
So
advice.
for small blocks, small locations like ours, because our block is so small, we don't want smelly piles of stuff and buckets full of stuff. So this way is just perfect for us. And all you need is a piece of 90 or 100 mil pipe, end cap, and a hole in there to make let the liquid out.
Okay, and these type of fertilizers, are they going to be used every day, every week, every month, or a time in the year?
I do once a week. At the right time of year, in winter and early spring, I do once a week. And I use them, I dilute them 1 to 50 as a foliar spray to spray onto the leaves, and 1 to 10 as a drench to put down onto the roots. And we harvest maybe 30 or 40 kilos of nettles from a neighbour's block that we know doesn't use poisons. And then I make up a bulk of this. It will store for a few months. And I also dry a lot of it too, because you can make nettles fertilizer like a nettle tea as well. You add the dried to the water, you let it soak for a couple of days, strain it out, and away you go. And it's great being full of potassium. It's really good at fruiting time. When your flowers, like for your tomatoes, when your flowers start to set, then you hit it with this stuff. When the fruit's on there, when your fruit trees have got fruit on, spray them with this. And the potassium helps the fruit to form, and it helps it to stay on the tree as well, so they don't fall. So an amazing stuff from a weed that most people wouldn't look twice at.
Absolutely. And what you just advised was to store them, which makes it easy, because generally collecting nettles is not a fun journey unless you like it. Sometimes people like this, but so
I'm immune to them now. I can harvest them with my bare hands and they don't
yes,
bother me. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But
and
when I started, ouch, everything was like, oh, I hated it.
Yeah, my grandmother was doing that with no problem. She had fingers that were double mine size.
Yeah.
Definitely was. And so you can store them, you can have them. Do you think it's possible to store like vacuum sealed, like fancy stuff, or there is a specific way?
I haven't tried, but most of it's like an anaerobic bacteria in there. So even if you seal it in a vacuum, it will still decay further because the bacteria don't need air to do their job.
Okay.
So I found maybe 3 months worth. So I'll finish winter and spring out, and then maybe until March, my fertilizers are still good. And then I'll switch to the dried to make just a straight tea from it.
Interesting, interesting.
So that works quite well. And one of the things to realize with all of this is it's all about bacteria. It's all about the microbes. You keep the microbes happy and well fed, and they'll be fine. And
that is for making the fertilizer, or this is also for the plant, so the rooting system of a plant?
For both. For making it, you keep oxygen in there. When I make big 60-litre bins of tea, and I'll put this fertilizer in there, this nettle tea, rainwater, some molasses for the bacteria to eat, and then pump oxygen through it with an air bubbler, like for an aquarium.
Oh, okay. Really, so you're facilitating the fermentation at this point.
Exactly,
you give them sugar, and then that gives them energy.
Yeah, they breed and reproduce.
And then adding the airflow too is also a good way to move them up.
It mixes them,
And mix them up. Yes. Okay. So that's interesting. It's like
mostly they get their oxygen from the water, not the top of the surface or the bubbles, but the bubbles mix everything around. Bring them up to the top, bring them down, so they can breed faster.
I also remember that when I had to set up a septic tank in Bulgaria, there was a really big topic regarding anaerobic and aerobic bacteria, and the fact that anaerobic bacteria, they can be more dangerous than the aerobic one. Yeah. And having this airflow in some ways also help to keep a control of those. Yeah. Because for them, oxygen, it's dangerous. It's actually the opposite than for us. So it's interesting. Do you have a picture of your secret container?
A secret container? No, it's just a 60-litre black plastic bin. Nothing special. I found it on the side of the road. I thought this will be good. So it's all recycled.
That's really good. Definitely.
Yeah.
What else can we tell to our followers?
What else can we tell? Let's have a look. We've just finished Christmas time, haven't we? So a few people will have. Let's have a look here. Let's bring this far. Maybe some fish, especially after the Australia Day weekend. Some fish there. We can turn that into an amazing fertilizer. It takes a few months, but we can turn that into a fertilizer that doesn't smell, doesn't rot. So here we've got some cockles from a friend and a little snapper and all kinds of stuff. that we had hanging around. And then you mix that with molasses by equal weight. So the same weight of molasses to the weight of the fish scraps. And it'll look really good like this when you finish. And then what you do is you put the mixture into an airtight container. It has to be, this is an anaerobic process. And the microbes in there will start by eating the molasses, and then they'll eat all of the fish flesh and the shellfish flesh and everything in there. And they'll turn that into a rich liquid. And that's called, by biodynamic farmers and all those kind of people, it's called fish amino acid, because you've extracted all of the most of the goodness out of the fish and turned it into a liquid. And that'll make a thick, oily liquid. And you use that in your watering can, maybe 50 to 1, and put it around the base of the plants into the root, onto the roots. This one you don't spray onto the leaves because it's too oily. It can cause some trouble there.
Okay.
This will give so many nutrients, so much goodness to the soil and to the roots, and the soil microbes will go crazy, and they'll in turn feed the plants, and then everybody will be really super happy from there. So it's an amazing stuff. We only use small quantity, 1 to 50, 1 to 100 dilution. And you can put that into an airtight container and it will seal for quite a while. It will store 6 months. And then when you finish the first batch, if there's stuff left over, you do the next process, which is my favorite one now since I learned about it. And that is a vinegar extraction. So you do the same thing. So this was a vinegar extraction, sorry, this picture. This is loading up. So this is the remnants of the fish amino acid one, the molasses mixture we made after 3 months. Fill it up with vinegar, and then the vinegar will extract more of the mineral content out. It will help to break down the bones more, the scales, the shells, and other stuff, because you have some things that are water soluble, some things are soluble in alcohol, some things soluble in acids, some things soluble in vinegar, which is an acid. Vinegar is an acid. So this way you're maximizing it. You're getting all of the best. You've got all the flesh and everything's broken down through the molasses and the bacteria. Now you're getting extra out of it with the vinegar. And you can do maybe 2 or 3 soaks with vinegar to keep it going. So you can end up with, from a kilo of fish, you could end up with maybe 3 or 4 liters of good fertilizers.
Okay, and definitely we consume more than 1 kilogram of fish per year.
That's right.
So that's enough to fertilize the garden. And we are speaking what size of garden we are speaking about? Like if
our garden is a small garden. We have 320 cubic meters, so we grow 80 meters of ground space, plus we also grow upwards to another 3 meters, so we 4 meters. So we count our range in cubic meters, but we're smaller than an average suburban front yard. That's all we are. So this kind of fertilizers will do a normal 1/4 acre block, the traditional Australian 1/4 acre block with a good veggie patch and some fruit trees. As I said earlier, it's not suitable for large scale farming and things, but I have a friend who does this on 2 acres, does similar processes, and gets good results.
Oh, definitely. And it's when you start to know the technique and then you have you do that the first time, then it's like, baking your sourdough bread.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. You have a mother, you have a base, you have a container, you use just that specific container so there are not risk of messed up.
Yeah.
And then you simply add the ingredients, and then they start to do their job, and then it became a sort of routine.
Yeah, and it's like your sourdough. You start to think of your fertilizers as living things, because you're breeding and you're multiplying bacteria, all different kinds of microbes in there. And you've got to give them the good conditions so they can go under the soil and then provide the good conditions for the plants. So your fertilizer is no longer a powder that you buy from the hardware store or the garden center, or a liquid you buy and you spray. It becomes a part of your life. It becomes a living thing.
Like you have your dog, you have your cat, and then you have your 2 or 3 different containers of fertilizer they're growing over there. Hopefully they're not growing out the containers. They stay in the containers. They're not attacking in the night, which is really good. But it's just a small switch of mentality, I can say, and then it's gonna help a lot, because what you do, you're simply increasing the number of living creatures that they are making benefit, that they're providing benefit to the garden. And that's what we want. I mean, we want to increase the fertility. We want to increase this type of goodies, bacteria and fungus, that they are the ones that they are providing benefit to the plants, which are giving
life to everything.
Yeah, which are giving back to us. Okay, so we had fertilizer based on fish, and then based on melasse, then moving on vinegars, that is for the soil. We had one instead for you were saying sort of fruiting, which was the one based on wheat and nettles. And what else do we have? Do you think there is a need? Because actually, I don't know. Maybe there is not much need of fertilizing. I don't know.
This is another one. This is a fruit ferment.
Mm-hmm.
So this is when it loads up, if we can load it. It's not loading. What am I doing? There we are. This is just fruit that came off of the trees, the stuff the birds knocked off and the rats and everything. And it's added to a bucket of water, just rainwater, sealed up for a month. And that ferments, that breaks down everything. You'll see bubbles and all kinds of good stuff coming out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you strain that. The solid material goes straight onto the worm farm or to your chickens, and the liquid gets used as a drench for the soil. So you dilute it once again, 20 to 1 or so, add it straight back to the soil from the trees that the fruit came from. So you're adding waste nutrients from the tree that they came from back to the same tree.
Back to the tree.
The tree gets what it needs, because it takes a lot of effort and a lot of energy for a tree to produce plums, for example. It takes a lot of energy, and that energy is wasted if you just throw it away, or if the birds get to it, or you just see a piece of fruit with a bite in it, you throw it into the bin. That's wasted. So you can return this. And this way you don't get the problem of fruit flies and all this sort of stuff either, because you're making a liquid. That liquid is going straight into the soil. There's nothing sitting around on the surface. And straight away, the plants can start to take it all up.
Sorry, so I'm smiling. I'm smiling just because the same technique you can make cider. So you're gonna have two fish with one ingredient. Like you have your friends drunk and also the plants happy.
I'll show you the next picture, which was what I was going to show you, how easy it is to do this on a small scale.
Mm-hmm.
Some apple cores and chunks I had from drying some apples, and they were making an apple cider for me.
Here you are. See that there was the trick. There was the trick. But again, we are speaking about these, and it's interesting because with the market that we have, if you can come back, please, on the stop on sharing.
Okay.
The market that we have, we can actually bring in nutriments from outside. Mm-hmm. So one of the good things about this mentality, which keeps in consideration the amount of nutriments that we have in the property and the amount we want to have, you actually can start to collect fruits and plants from the shopping. Now you go to do your groceries, and then you start to consume your energy, to provide to yourself your energy, but also start to store the leftovers in your garden.
In your garden.
Instead of giving them to somebody else, mildly, because that's what's happened. You paid for these products, and they should stay there. And at that point, it became a cycle of energy. At one point, you won't need to buy anymore from outside because you've been storing enough. Maybe it never is possible to do zero buying outside. It's never possible, but it's definitely a good thing.
I actually buy just a generic soluble fertilizer from time to time. Thrive or something like that. And that's just, I can put it on the garden and that will add the micronutrients, the molybdenum, all these sort of weird, wonderful sounding ones, magnesium, manganese, and all that sort of thing. Because it's relatively easy to know your big three, the nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. That's the NPK on your fertilizer bag. It's easy to work those out, but the micronutrients, which you need in tiny trace amounts, it's very hard to work with them. So I insure my garden by buying just a 1.8 kilo pack of Thrive, and that'll last me 3 months here. And once a month, I just put some of that around the garden a little bit too, because some of those chemicals, some of those elements, they're useful for fruit set, for leaf development, for the production of chlorophyll, which is important for the energy of the plants. And I know I'm getting a lot of those back from these fertilizer methods I'm using, but I'm not sure at this stage of what levels they're at.
Oh yeah,
so
well, you
I just
probably
do
will
this
need.
sure.
Yeah, you probably will need have a laboratory, a chemical laboratory in home to figure it out if you have all the nutrients. So in this case, is trying to simplify a little bit and then cover out a little bit everything to make sure that we start with a good base and then we keep doing our process.
Maybe I can get on to Bianca from last week at Wait, and she can get me a laboratory out there.
Oh yeah, that would be a good trick actually. We could speak with her.
Yeah.
It would be a good way to sharing between the own gardening and actually the big food industry.
Yeah, that'll be great. Because as I said, it's very hard to tell those tiny things. The big ones are easy, and you can just see by looking at the plant, yeah, there's enough nitrogen there, or yeah, there's a lot of phosphorus there. But yeah, molybdenum, for example, I don't know how to test for that until the plant gets sick, and then it's too late. Yes,
absolutely. And and you have the eyes, which means that you've already been spending time, and you are capable to see the big one. But as you said, there's more one, which I probably won't be able to see if there's enough potassium or not. I look at people, not things. But anyway.
So we can skip on to talking about trace elements. There's one very important one, and we can make that very easily in our gardens. Okay. And that's calcium. Calcium is actually a trace element.
Oh, so we are speaking about eggshells.
Eggshells here, yeah. Calcium is very useful for plants because plants use it to make their cell walls, and they make the cell walls strong. And if you have strong cell walls, you have a strong plant, more resistant to predators, more resistant to infection. Okay. So a good level of calcium is good without overdoing it, of course. So eggshells are fine for this. And whenever I make up a new garden bed, a new tub, I'll put just a teaspoonful of powdered eggshells into the potting mix. And that lets the plants to get started with calcium. It takes a little bit for these to break down. It takes a little bit of time. And then the plants can start straight away. And it gives them that extra boost. And you'll see the greener plants. They'll actually look greener. I think they do, yeah. How do you process the eggshells? Like you get a mortar and then you make a powder from it? Or? What I do is I get the eggshells, and we have some cafes and restaurants around that we get things from, so we have plenty. I'll give them a wash to get rid of all everything on the outside. And then I'll break them up and put them into an oven at 150 degrees for about 20 minutes. And that burns off all of that organic material, the lining, the things that will go rotten if you leave them for too long. Okay. And it just leaves the eggshell, which is calcium, phosphorus, silica, all together. Then I grind that up into, I've got a NutriBullet, one of those blenders. Blend that up into a fine powder and just use it. Just, teaspoonful every 2 square meters or so. Just tiny amounts. You don't need a lot, but its presence is really important. Yeah, I think that for somebody that does a regular size garden, we have even too much of food. I mean, there are too much leftovers that they probably won't be able to use just for our garden. I went to a friend's house yesterday, day before yesterday. They asked me if I wanted to do some peaches. We picked 30 kilos of peaches and plums. And when we looked back at the trees, it was like we had never been there. There was still more. So we shared that around with the community. We're drying some. We did all kinds of stuff with it. And there was a lot of waste. So that's all being fermented now in a big bucket. And some of that's going back to the people that gave us the fruit so they can put it straight back on their ground, on their soil. And some will go here as well.
That's interesting. It's an interesting philosophy, actually, because it helps to do the opposite. Instead of being focused and produce in big amount in one specific area, actually we will be able to produce fragmenting the production in small pouches, therefore having, in my opinion, less impact on the ecosystem, because one of the big issues correlated with the massive production of food is that when you have one crop monoculture, all the ecosystem around the monoculture is suffering, from the big animals to the tiny microscopic bacteria, while fragmenting the food production in this way. Obviously, if it will be possible to make it sustainable, but it will be much more beneficial, because instead of the cutting pieces of land, you're simply cutting the production in small pieces, and then you have pollinators coming, and you have all the life around it that is going to be more balanced. My green soul is coming out.
Good, it's good. Also, one thing I look at, I changed my perspective at one time on gardening. I used to think, what can I get out of this garden? What can I get from it? Now I think, what can I put into this garden? Because I know the more I put in, the more will come out. So, and things that surprise me come out. I don't know what half of the things are, but we eat them anyway. And you see different insects, we had 2 juvenile blue-tongued lizards on our front porch the other day, which was fantastic, because that means the blue tongues are breeding, because these were babies. It means that they're blue-tongued lizards breeding, and they eat slugs and snails and slaters and all kinds of pests in the garden. And because they're a fairly advanced creature, they're called a top-level predator. So to have a top-level predator in the garden means that the ecosystem below it is healthy and thriving. And that made me really happy to see those. But they were too quick for me to take a picture of. They disappeared very quickly. So, but I'm really happy with that. And one other thing, on the way, talking about eggshells, there's something else which comes from all of our barbecues and things as well. We can do that. Bones, especially chicken bones.
Okay.
Especially chicken bones. What you can do is you do the same with the eggshells. You roast them. You clean them up. Then you roast them to get rid of all the meat and the ligaments and things like that, oxidize those. And then you soak them in vinegar for a month or 2. And that will extract all the mineral compounds out of it, the phosphorus, the calcium, the silica, things like that. And this is a good way to get a phosphorus-rich fertilizer. So the eggshells were for a calcium-rich fertilizer. This makes for a phosphorus-rich fertilizer.
Okay.
So once again, free stuff. Everybody can get. You don't need. I use apple cider vinegar here because I make my own in bulk. I make 10 liters at a time. But you can just go and get your normal everyday white vinegar from your supermarket, and away you go. And the good thing with this, there's no fixed measurements. You don't need to know weights. You don't have to combine it. All you have to know, if you're using the molasses with the fish, it's got to be an equal weight of molasses with the fish. With the fruit fertilizers, with the vinegar, this sort of thing, you don't need to know. You just put it in there, leave it for a while. It will do its thing, and then it will come out. With the eggshells, you can stir occasionally, and as long as bubbles come up, leave it there for a bit longer because it's still reacting. But once the bubbles stop, for example, that's a good time. You filter it out and use it in the garden.
Easy.
Easy, yeah. There's nothing hard to this, yeah. You just returning or adding things to the garden that could come from it, yeah. It doesn't have to be, that's right, it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be at all.
I've seen something that I use for work when I work in a cafe in Adelaide,
Mhm.
and I've seen coffee, the ground, the
Coffee
leftover.
ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, coffee grounds are fantastic. I use them here. We get that's 10 kilos in there. I got that from a local coffee shop.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, I get we could get 50 kilos a day from local coffee shops for our composting collective that we've got going, but I just put a little bit aside for me. And yeah, coffee grounds is great. It's rich in nitrogen. It's got a lot of other minerals in it, some all different kinds of elements in there, slightly acidic, and it's full of it's an organic material, so it will go on the garden. And it's good to reuse these because it takes something like 420 liters of water to grow a coffee plant, harvest it, ship it, pack it, and then by the time you get it in your cup of coffee, less than 1% of that plant has been used.
Yes.
So there's enormous waste. So if we can reuse those coffee grounds, it's like adding water back into the ecosystem, and we're adding organic material and nutrition to our garden.
Yes.
And we're taking out of the waste stream. It's not being thrown away anymore.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that I've been saying actually to some of my customers when we were starting about speaking about coffee quality and all these type of things, and why I'm so focused on the quality and the value of food through experiences. It's because when we eat something, the best way to enjoy it is to understand a bit more about it. And one of the things I say is why I'm so focused about coffee varieties, region. It's because every time you have a coffee cup, you, as you said, you consume 150 liters of water.
Yeah.
Which is, we cannot afford to do that every time. We have to understand. So if we have only one, but it gives us an experience and has complexity in flavors, all these type of things, it's much more pleasurable than drinking 6 and without even realize. And I'm Italian, by the way, that we drink a lot of coffee on the run.
Also, coffee plants are one of the first that are going to be first commercial crops that are going to be badly affected by climate change.
Mm-hmm.
They will suffer, and it will only be fairly high altitudes can grow them. A lot of the bigger states, just where they are now, won't be able to grow them. So people that still deny climate change or argue against doing anything about it, if we're in a coffee shop, I tell them you won't be able to get your coffee. Or your coffee will be $100 a cup or something like that.
And more expensive, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah. We grow coffee here in our garden, actually. We get, the plant is very healthy, and you eat the leaves or use them as a tea to reduce blood sugar.
Okay.
So you don't need the berries, yeah. You can use the tea. They have pretty flowers, and the flowers open at nighttime. So they pollinate, moths and mosquitoes and things pollinate them. And they're sweet and they're nice. And you get the berries, but the berries are hard to process. You have to ferment them, then you have to remove the skin and all this sort of stuff, dry them. So just enjoy the plant for what it is.
It is, yeah. So interesting. A lot of people think caffeine, they want to have coffee for caffeine, and they don't know that actually the plant uses the caffeine as a form of antifreezer.
Yeah.
So higher is the altitude of the coffee plant, and the lower
caffeine,
is the amount of caffeine. So
amazing, isn't it?
It is. It's so interesting. Well, there's so many things to say, but we're going to move out to the topic at this point.
Yeah,
Do you have anything left for fertilizers for people following for today?
You got your normal things like your worm farms as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, worm farms are often not used correctly because the liquid that comes from that you collect in your bucket or whatever underneath the worm farm isn't worm wee or worm urine like they say. It's actually the leachate from where all the water and the vegetables and the fruit are broken down and sort of become a liquid. So we shouldn't use that directly on plants like lettuces, things like that we're going to eat quickly. We should use it more onto the soil around perennial plants or plants you're not going to eat for a few weeks, because there's a lot of microbes in there, and some of them aren't quite good for us if we eat them. So the best thing to do to get worm is to get the worm castings and take the worms out, of course, put them in a mesh bag or a stocking or a sock, put them in a bucket of water and swirl it around and get that to extract that out, and then put that on your plants. And that's a far more effective way of doing it.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. That is a good way, because you have the worms that they are creating the humus, if you want to call it. Is that right?
Yeah. And
then also you have the water that you can still use for fertilizer, which is fermented, so can be dangerous. So not spread yourself.
That's
interesting. Interesting.
So that's many things. That's it. We finished.
That's it for today. Well, I think that was plenty of things.
Okay.
And for the people that's following on the radio and on the different platforms, obviously there will be the recorded version online. So it will be on YouTube, will be on as a podcast. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and also the radio, which the followers, I'm going to say hi, because obviously they're not seeing us shaking our hands.
Everybody,
and hopefully they are enjoying these long topics regarding gardening. So Malcolm, it was a pleasure as usual. And now we're going to figure it out. What's going to be the next topic? Is something you want to add in, or are we okay for today?
I like to think about it. We've done two pretty complicated topics the last, and two topics that change the way that you think about gardening. So we have to keep going with that theme.
Yes, absolutely.
Which means I have to work harder for the next one.
Okay. So also for us following now, there will be other interesting topics that we will speak on the AgriAdventures podcast. We will speak about edible flowers, and we will speak about native plants that can be used for cooking. So I will direct my attention more on the cooking side and on the culinary side. And but there is also an interesting podcast that I'm working on regarding the kurong. So, and we will speak about the sustainability of the kurong itself. So the water flow, and we will do that with the fisherman that actually is based down in the kurong region. So really interesting. Hopefully it's going to be ready soon to share with everybody. So Don, that's it. Thank you, Malcolm, for being with us.
Simone, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining in and listening and watching. I'll mute myself now.
Wait a second. Please remember us where the followers can find you. We have a Facebook page. We have an Instagram page that is the Ligaya Garden. Am I right?
Yes. Ligaya Garden. And a website, ligayagarden.online.
Okay, perfect.
It's one word, ligayagarden.online.
Okay,
that's the best place to find us,
Lovely. So if they have extra questions, they can get in contact. And when there will be the chance that you will have some workshop coming out, that will be able to come and visit and maybe be part with this and learning through the experiences.
We're putting together some now, maybe 3 by mid-year. We're hoping to get 3 new workshops going. One art from my wife, she's a famous artist, or fairly famous artist, and 2 gardening, one gardening for me and 1 cooking, which will be my wife and son as well too.
Perfect. Lovely. We will see.
Through AgriAdventures,
Surprise, surprise. Thank you again.
Okay then, see you.
And see you next time here on the AgriAdventures channel. Bye.